Welcome to GIC TV, episode number 6, Survive and Thrive, Insight and Tactics from the Long-Timers. When we look up on the screen there, we had to come up with a better name than the other option of not the Long-Timers. But really looking forward to this discussion with them over the next hour or so. Start off with a quick introduction of our 4 panelists, powerhouse. We've got Michael Lemus, 16 years at Congressional Country Club, sort of the youngster in the group, as we're calling him now. David Burton, recently retired, 2 days. 24 years at New South Wales Golf Club in Australia.
And
Barry
he's
Linke,
glowing.
and he's glowing. He's still he's getting ready to soak up after the post retirement stuff. Barry Linke, 31 years at the Grange, as 3 July this year. I think it was your
correct, Mark.
Yeah, the Grange down in South Australia. And of course, Greg Patterson, 34 years at the Beach Club in Los Angeles. So welcome, everybody. Welcome all to you. Michael, you're over in Florida. So it's at 9 o'clock at night or something. Greg's in Los Angeles. David's in New South Wales and South Australia. And I'm up on the Gold Coast in a cave here running this for all of you. But thanks and welcome, everybody. Thanks to the panelists. Just to open up, I guess we'll go just around the traps here with each of you. Just some opening statements about your tenure and I guess your thoughts on longevity in the golf industry. We'll start with you, Michael.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening to everybody from Jupiter, Florida. I am the newbie, but I also want to let you know you're cutting into my drinking time. It's 8 o'clock here, and I haven't been able to have my beer or my wine, and I'm going to try and do the best that I can. Mike, one of the things we talked about, and we'll talk about in more detail tonight, and I really look forward to this, is kind of, again, I'm interested to hear from the other 3 panelists and maybe others on the longevity. I had 16 years at Congressional Country Club. Probably, I would say 16 of the best years of my life. I absolutely loved my time at Congressional. I ended up leaving Congressional, and I left because I honestly was made an offer I couldn't refuse. I had many different offers during my time at Congressional to take on opportunities at other clubs that were as prestigious, as good as Congressional. And I just felt so comfortable living in Washington. And part of that was, I guess, being a South African, living in an international city like Washington. The culture of the club of Congressional just made me feel at home. I remember my first interview and my sitting down with the then president who was doing this in his house and just us discussing really the whole aspect of Congressional, the whole concept of what this position was about. And I just remember feeling really good about it. I felt through my entire time that it was a good cultural fit for me. And when I say cultural fit, we may get to that later on in the conversation. But, if your aspiration, I'll make it as easy as I can. If your aspiration is to drive a Mercedes-Benz and the club is a club where predominantly most of the members drive Fords, that's probably not going to be a good fit, right? It's probably not going to be a good cultural or value fit for you. And I know that's a very materialistic way of putting it, but it's the best way I can explain understanding that cultural fit. Do you feel comfortable when you drive in the gate? Do you feel comfortable with yourself in your own skin when you go to work? What are the emotions that you feel when you come into the club? And how do those dynamics change? So we'll hopefully talk about that. The other thing I think about longevity, I think about having to reinvent yourself. Part of this is you really can't stay stagnant. When you first get to a club and you get to the board and you're an ex officio on the board, whatever your role is, I remember thinking in the first year, everybody was deferring to Mike. Well, Mike, what do you think? Mike, how do you feel about this? What do you think? And then I noticed over a period of time, less and less people refer to you, because if you just become a piece of the furniture, you'll eventually get to a point where they don't defer to you at all. And at that point, I think there was about 3 years into my career that I realized I got to reinvent myself. Every day, I've got to come to work. I've got to be different. I've got to keep up to speed with what's going on. I've got to be the expert in club management, because if you're not the expert, they can go out and find somebody else, or just kind of you just become a part of the furniture. I think that's the other thing. Hopefully, we'll talk about. I mentioned being the expert, and then the last one before I pass this on is really to be relevant, right? So that is really staying up to date with what's going on in the industry, and I think both Greg and I have, in our careers, spent an awful lot of time teaching, an awful lot of time on the road, away from our clubs, going to different parts of the world. I mean, Greg and I literally have been to at least 10 countries where we've been together all over the world where we've done this stuff. And people would say to me, well, why do you do that? I said, I did that because it keeps me relevant. I can come back from Taiwan and I can come back from Australia and New Zealand, and I've got a whole bunch of new ideas that I can then take and incorporate into my club. And as I've heard before Greg say, steal other people's idea and call it your own. And I love that, because that really was what it was all about. And then the last thing is just the loyalty and trust element. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, but there's a trust that develops between you and the board, between you and the club. And when that trust is there, unless it's broken, it's something that's there for a long period of time. And that's what kept me at the club. They believed in me. I believed in them. And as I said, when I did make the change, it was really a difficult decision for me. I turned down the offer 3 times to go to Ocean Reef Club. 3 times I was approached, 3 times it was put in front of me, and 3 times I turned it down. And then finally I said to my wife, you know what, they might be trying to tell me something. And at that stage, I made a change and I made a move to a different place. But Michael, that's my opening statement, and I'll hand it back, I think, to David.
Yeah, David. Excellent. Thank you, Michael. David, recently off the, you're not in the unemployment line yet, I guess. You don't need to go for your job keeper or any of that.
I'm okay there.
No, thanks, David. Thanks for coming on that too. I know it's been a big week, probably emotionally as well, as you're leaving such a big part of your life. I'd love to hear your insight just on that career and any advice you can give to our watchers.
If I can just say, Mike, Dave is going to become a professional hockey player now, full time.
I like it.
I've got the fake teeth. Look, I guess if we just touch on why stay, because I think one of the great opportunities this morning is to share some advice on perhaps how to stay long. But I think staying is a little bit about the style of a person you are and your own personality. And I think if you are a person that really strives for, that, as Mike referred to, the trust and getting a relationship and loyalty and working hard. I always say that if you work hard, you're honest, and you do what's best for the club, it's very difficult to criticize you in your role. And New South Wales Golf Club was, it's a world-class golf club. So I never felt like, oh, I'm just going to use it as a stepping stone. I mean, I was chuffed when I got that job at 30 years old or whatever it was. And I was way over my head at the time, but I kind of grew into it. And I think, those deep relationships and the loyalty, and it depends on the style of person you are. I mean, let's not forget, it also pays the bills and puts your kids through school and all that stuff. So there's the practical reality of that. But, I was always delighted to be part of something, and New South Wales was always strategically driven. So I always felt good that I was mixing my financial background with sport, which is what I always wanted to do. And that now
he comes back. We've had some internet issues down with David's thing. We'll probably just come back to you, David, in just a second. Barry, we'll go up to you to get your opening statements and thoughts.
Thanks, Mike, and good morning to everybody. I've been at Grange for 31 years, and as you said, still going. When I first came here, I probably didn't have any period or tenure in mind. Maybe 5 years in the back of my mind. To stay a long time, I think you've got to like club, like golf, like club life. I enjoy golf. I enjoy being about golf, and I also saw great opportunity at Grange. I thought that at the time that I came here, there was a great room for the club to develop. Grange, and being a tournament club, they had hosted many professional tournaments. I was keen to be involved and to be involved with the running of those and learn what was to do there. So I saw opportunity there. I think the secret to saying is staying around is you've got to surround yourself with good people, with loyal staff. Committees come and go, and there can be difficulties there. But I think if you've got a good group of core senior staff that are loyal to you and that are sort of moving in the same direction that you are, I think it can be a great tenure. So I've loved my time here. I agree with Michael. I think you have to consistently reinvent yourself. Michael said every year. I'm not quite sure about every year, but you do have to reinvent yourself, because when you stay somewhere a long time, a lot of the same suggestions or issues do come up, and you have to look at them differently at different times. So I think you do have to reinvent yourself. As some staff do change, I've also found that an opportunity to make changes as well, and perhaps that's reinventing yourself. I also agree that you need to really keep up to date with what's happening in the industry. Golf membership's I've been through the very highs when I was first here, to huge waiting lists to nothing, and now golf's quite trendy again. So it's a real mixture of things for me.
It's very welcome back, David. Sorry, we just
Sorry,
had to
I
jump
got
away.
trouble. Where did I get cut off?
Hockey.
No, what I was saying was that I think because New South Wales was also a business that was run strategically, I was always happy, because I thought, well, what better business? I'm in the sporting business. I'm in a company that's strategically driven. I'm part of a great brand. So I loved all of it. I mean, the challenge is just trying to, as I said, if you're the glue and you're reporting to 9 directors and you have 1,100 members and 50 staff, there's a relentless need to be managing that. And I think that's a great challenge. I think the thing is, how do you keep doing that every year? And you truly have to love you have to love the industry, you have to love your brand, and you have to have a good relationship with.
We lost.
We're going to have it again.
Yeah.
We'll go over to you, Greg.
Okay. It's interesting, because when I came to the club all those many years ago, I never intended to stay. As a matter of fact, when the board first talked to me, they said, well, and I'd come from a great country club, and I assumed I was going to go back to the country club business, because that's where the badges were. The big boys were in the country clubs, whether it be the Congressionals or the Bel Air or the LA Country Club. So I was going to there, and I told the board, I'll give you 3 years. I won't look for a job for 3 years. And the 3 years was just enough to convince me that I was properly aligned with that club. And I wasn't much of a thinker at that time. I was just a doer, very ambitious. I want to move on, make the big bucks, drive the Mercedes. And I discovered something deep about myself, that happiness in a job and a willingness to stay and be loyal has more to do with sort of the inner values that you have, and are they being satisfied by that environment? And I didn't even know at the time, because I hadn't articulated it, but I really find that I like relationship building, and I like this thing called community. And the Beach Club had those very things, and all the members were members of the great country clubs, and one thing the next. I knew them in the country club environment. They had different personalities. All of a sudden at the Beach Club, there was this warmth, this humanism, and I needed community. And I guess I was fortunate as well. I'd arrived at a point where I didn't need another badge. That, I'm at this club or that club or one thing and the next. And so I found when I came to the Beach Club that my deeply embedded life interests were being satisfied. And I never even knew what that meant. I love to teach. I love to create relationships. I love to write. I love making presentations. I love politics and dealing with people. And I love creativity and projects. And all of a sudden I said, holy smokes, it's all right here. And my wife always made more money than I did, so I didn't need the bucks. But the reality is that the things that gave me and my soul deep satisfaction, I found within those first 3 years that this is for me. And you might ask, one of the reasons why would you stay is, I have this saying, I call it the rule of 5. It takes you 5 years to really get to know a club. And we went through so many changes. It was a horror story 5 years for all sorts of reasons. And I said, I ain't never going to do that again. So I made the determination. I was an evolutionary maintenance manager, and I was not an empire builder. Empire builders go to the next big club and then the next big club, and I salute them. And I said, that's not who I am. And I found out all of a sudden, all of the great issues that I wanted to deal with, whether it be in books or with school or whatever, were embedded at the Beach Club. And so I stayed because it helped me know myself. And before I got there, the only self I knew was ambition. And ambition translated into money and status. So that's really one of many reasons why I stayed. But that's the realization I came to in the first 3 years I was there. It was a very big deal.
All right. Thanks, Greg. David, we'll try to finish up with yours. Hopefully we've got the tech. No, we got another frozen. No. We got one question that's come in from the viewers for the panel. Trust is a key factor for longevity of senior managers with board. How do you keep the trust factor when the board changes every 2 to 3 years? Any thoughts from the panel on that one?
Right. Well, can I jump in?
Yeah, trust and longevity with senior managers.
Trust is absolutely fundamental. I think everybody on this panel will tell you without trust, you ain't going to get nowhere in this world, because trust is anticipating that you'll do what you say and that you say what you'll do. So trust is easy if you communicate before you make a decision, once you made a decision, and after you made the decision. Trust is absolutely fundamental, and there are steps that every manager must go through in order to generate that trust. Absolutely fundamental. But it's communication, I'd say, is absolutely key.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, David. You will go ahead, David.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And one of the things that's very scary or unsettling is when you've got trust issues with either your staff or directors, because what is usually this beautiful harmony that works day in, day out, it all gets jeopardized. And I think that and Barry talked about the relationship with his presidents. I think that's absolutely critical, because everybody has to feel like that someone has their back in this relationship for it all to work. If it doesn't, you suddenly work under a very different pretense. And that's why the relationships with your directors and your key staff is critical, as well as members. Members have to feel like that you're an honest guy and that you're going to do what's right for the club all the time. The minute that gets distorted, there's problems. So I couldn't agree more.
Question, I guess, to the panel, and we'll start with you, David. First is, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself, your young self, I guess, at the start of your tenure? So looking when you first started, what advice would you come back and tell yourself?
Well, the first thing I would say is listen a lot. I think when you first come in, you've got to have good energy. They wouldn't have hired you if you didn't have good energy. But if you listen a lot, you will quickly learn what's important. You'll learn what the personalities are doing, especially on the board. You got to try to understand what directors really want instead of what you think they want. And the biggest thing is to understand what the structure really.
1 second, see if he gets back. Yeah, we'll go off to you, Barry.
Okay. I would, for me, when I first started to now, I would say don't take things so personally or seriously. Quite often in clubs, there's a bit of chitter chat around the place, and I think at times you can sort of take that personally when perhaps it's not directed at you personally. It's the member might be venting. I agree. You need to listen to people. You need to be a good listener, but then in listening, you need to be able to decipher what's take the good out of what you're hearing and perhaps what you don't need to worry about so much. I believe in always being positive. I think you've got to be positive around staff, positive around committee, even if you're having a bad day. You can't let anyone know you're having a bad day. So I think that's sort of very important, and I probably do that a bit differently. You need to probably in the early days I was a bit slow to work out who were the key players. I was probably trying to please too many people all of the time or most of the time, and that's pretty impossible in an environment where you've got a couple of thousand members like we have. or even with committee. Sometimes there's a lot of different ideas on committee, so you can't please everybody all the time. And I think I tried to do that rather than determining who was who were the key players, the power players. That's probably where I would sort of look a bit differently now to quite a few years ago.
Right. Excellent. Now back to you, David.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know where I got cut off, but I apologize for my internet. But one of the things that I've often had conversations with younger or guys that have been at it for a while but struggle is that I question what's created the anxiety or the stress, and a lot of it is trying to win battles that you're never going to win. I mean, it's very unlikely you're going to win a battle against a director, and it's even unlikely you're going to win a battle against a member. You can apply logic, but be very careful in trying to take on battles that you're never going to win. And you got to understand that not everybody's going to like you. I mean, I walked into the golf club and right away, probably, I'm guesstimating, but there would easily have been 10% of the members just didn't like me because I was young. I wasn't Australian. They liked the guy before me. Things that had nothing to do with it. I haven't even met these people and they already, so you have to have kind of thick skin. And the other thing that you got to be careful of is getting work-life balance. And I know we've all heard this and we've been in health seminars our whole lives, but that is really quite critical because this job can eat you up. You can spend 80 hours, no problem. And if directors don't stop you from doing it and you do it, you will be there 80 hours and then everything else suffers. So it's sort of, good energy, listen a lot, and try to understand the structure so that you don't take on battles you're not going to win.
Excellent. That's some very sound advice. Greg?
Right. If I were to do it over again, and obviously with the cleverness that I didn't have at that time, I would have said your analytical skill set is critical. How do you analyze the culture that you're about to go in to see whether or not you're in alignment with that culture, and how do you change? By way of example, one of the first things in any culture is finding out what the governance structure is like. Do you truly understand who makes decisions, who advises on those decisions, how they're executed, who enforces it? I never looked at that. I learned it slowly over time. But if I were to go in now, I'd say you give me 2 weeks with this template of analyzing culture. And second thing is, what is the real why of the club? I mean, David was, it was Barry talking before. Yours is a real golf-centric club, and a lot of tournaments and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, you got to find out what is the why of that club. The why at the beach club was about family and relationship building and social enthusiasm. Is a completely different focus of their why. And all these people were members of the clubs. So to me, I wish somebody had given me, say, Greg, this is the template of how to analyze a culture. You got 2 weeks, write us a report about beach club culture and tell us what you see as the issues within each of those components. Now, obviously, what are the skill sets that you need to do that? Relationship building, to me, is the critical one in a club. You got to get the trust of the staff and the trust of the members, and you got to open up those lines of communication. But once you have that template, you can analytically go through the club and say, okay, what sort of goods, services, and programs does the club provide? What do the members want that aren't being provided? How can we go about getting those things? So I would have been much more analytical, and it took me essentially 5 years to learn all the stuff that I should have gotten in the first couple of months.
Yeah, wow. That's great insight. Michael?
So I want to go back to the question about trust and just give my answer on that quickly if I can, Mike.
Sure.
I think one of the things about trust is I always felt like I had to take the stance on behalf of the club. If you were doing the best for the club in every decision that you made, not every president, not every board member, not every committee member comes in with the best interest of the overall club at heart, right? And there are going to be times where they come in with different agendas, and whether you agreed with them or you didn't agree with them, I always felt for myself the trust that I needed was I always needed to make the decision that was best for the club. One, I felt good about that. Two, I believe that's what built the trust for me, that people could come to me and always felt like if they asked me a question, the answer they were going to get was not a partisan answer, wasn't in favor of one or other president. It was always because if we did this or didn't do that, it was going to be in the best interest of the club. On the other thing, I would just, again, great answers from all three of the panelists. I want to focus in on the one that David mentioned, and that is work-life balance. And I have one other. The work-life balance, I think, yeah, as a young manager getting to a club, especially for me as an immigrant coming to the United States, it was all about wanting to do the most I possibly can. The amount of hours that I spent at Congressional Country Club was just ridiculous. And I look back, the sacrifices I made on my family to do that, I often wonder if I was going to do it again with what I know today, would I do the same thing? And I look back and my answer is I probably would, because I think part of that was the reason why I've had success in the industry is because of the dedication and the time that I put in. As I got older, like Greg, as I got to know the club more, I got to learn when and how and why to be in certain places, right? And you didn't have to be there 80 hours. You learn when you have to be there. On a Saturday morning, I would go and tour the golf course backwards. The first 9 from 18 through 10, I'd see all the maintenance staff. We'd have a great conversation. They're getting prepared. So I'd have that HR relationship with my people. And then I'd start seeing on the back 9 from 9 back to 1, I'd see all the regulars that were out playing golf, and they'd see me. So I use that as an example of kind of knowing when you need to be seen. And then the last one was just on, and this has been touched on by all three, and that's communication. You know, early on, I didn't realize the value of listening. I didn't realize the value of the written word. I didn't realize the value of the spoken word. I didn't realize the value of being able to present. But being able to stand up in front of a board and being able to do all of those, do an effective, presentation to the board on finances, on staffing levels, on why you should do a US Open, those are the things that I think from a communication were really important.
Excellent. What were the challenges being faced when you started at the start of your tenure? And then how do I guess fast forward to what we're dealing with now with COVID? What was there other things at that time that, was there any big challenges that you came into from an industry standpoint? A lot of our people that are on viewers may still been in junior high school or something when they were starting your careers. What was the big factors you had to deal with then, and then look at now. And I know there's some feedback. David has some comments around that. I guess we go that way. With you, Barry, anything what was going on in the early days?
Yeah, look, thanks, Michael. I guess for me, one of the big changes over the years is been membership. When I came to this club, we had a 10-year waiting list, so just membership was something I never thought much about or had to think about. Now, obviously, that dwindled over the years to where we had no waiting list at all, and we were out there sort of marketing members. We're in the marketplace, so that's certainly been a big change. And now the pendulum's swinging back, and obviously golf's in a little mini boom at this stage. I also, when I think back, probably the condition of the golf course and the expectations of members now. When I first started, we did a lot of work. We had consultants in looking at our courses, looking at the turf, and over the period of time, we rebuilt both golf courses and changed turf types and those sorts of things. I think the membership back then was more accepting of how the course was presented. Weekends were the main main driver. Saturday, Sunday, you had the courses sort of fully prepared. Probably maybe for your ladies comp during the week and the midweek comp, and other days were probably pretty quiet. I think now the expectations are high all the time, so we need to be, courses need to be presented to the highest standard almost on any day of the week. People want it at the highest level. So that's sort of something that sort of really changed from back then. So like high expectations, they weren't so demanding then. So so for me that'd be the main thing. And I think membership's something that's really changed. Like we went into a period where we were, I think more people play golf when they join the club now. Back 30 years ago, or probably 20 years ago, you had lots of silent members. They would pay their fees. They might come out a couple of times a year. People that join the club now, they join to play golf, and everyone is playing golf at this particular time. So you're maintaining a lot fewer members than you were that you can sort of get on your golf courses. So obviously there's some financial implications there that you sort out as the years go on. So that's probably pretty much it for me.
Yeah, no, great. That's interesting to hear about the expectation point as well. Just thinking back about what the general industry was wanting, and then you were able to provide something better and move with the times, get ahead of the times maybe, and that they see that as a good thing. You're moving forward and being one of the leading courses. I guess, can we continue doing that? I guess, is there a point we can keep going higher and higher and higher?
Yeah. Look, you could work somewhere your whole life and probably not rebuild one golf course. We've totally rebuilt both golf courses in my time here, dug them up and rebuilt them, sort of thing. So they are totally different to when I first came here. We've probably done half a dozen major renovations on the clubhouse. So this club's been very much about keeping up with the times. We installed a gymnasium. There's not many golf clubs in Australia that have private golf clubs that have gymnasiums. So we've sort of looked at different avenues, different income streams as the years have gone on. So the business is very, very different. Probably 30 years ago it was a much easier business. Maybe it was an easier job. I'm not so sure about that, but it was certainly quite different to how it is now.
Yeah, great. Greg?
Right. It was a mess when I got there. That's all I can tell you. It was a funky place at the beach for rich people, and they weren't putting money into it. It was almost falling down. The staff were dreadful. We had no cash in the bank. It was a mess. And so my problem when I got there is I had 100 things on my list of things that have to be done or we're going to die, and I couldn't figure out which was going top of the list. It was a mess. So the first thing that came to mind was money. The club, for some reason, they didn't want to charge the dues that were necessary, put no money aside for replacements. Financially, it was a mess. And what's interesting is it's been run for 5 years by a member with a Harvard MBA. Just tells you that a Harvard MBA doesn't tell you how to run a club. And it was financially a mess. The staff were terrible. They had no hospitality focus. The place was a disaster. And it was a 5-month club. And the rest of the year, it really was almost dormant. So they said, the mission for me, Greg, make it a true 12-month club and bring some energy, make sure our finances are where they should be, and go from there. There wasn't a problem you can identify in management that wasn't on my desk at that time. Miserable members that were bitching and moaning, staff that were hostile toward other staff. It was a mess. So that's why I'm saying after 5 years, when I cleaned it all up, I said, I ain't ever going to do this again. I'll leave it to Michael Lemus to do it. I ain't going to do it again. So I had a lot of challenges. And for a guy that's never managed a club before with no real philosophy of management, and believe me, a master's degree does not give you a philosophy of management. I came in there, and members have, after 34 years when I was going, they said, Greg, what is the one thing that you remember? I said, I thank the club for. I said, I thank the club for giving me the rope that I needed to learn how to manage a club, because I knew nothing about club management when I got in there, because everything I had was book learning. Michael, was dumb as a rock, and the place needed somebody like David Burton to run it, and they had me. It was a disaster.
Oh, Michael, over to you. Good segue, I think.
It's a great segue, because I didn't know that. That's the first time, and all the time I spent with Greg, that's the first time I've heard that. But it's very similar, Greg. I inherited at Congressional something that they called Kennedy Chic, which was really, the place was run down. I mean, completely run down. Holes in the carpet, chips on the walls, staff that were hostile, didn't interact with the members. Staff would be fighting. The members were fighting with each other. Yep. Members were stealing from each other. It was a mess. And I was like, man, what have I walked into? But so I didn't have quite
Michael, I know what you walked into. It's parallel exactly.
It is. It's very interesting. But Mike, I think two of the things, actually maybe two things. One was IT. I started at Congressional in 1999. Y2K was imminent. It was right on us. I chose Jonas. I chose well because they ended up being, in the industry doing really well. But IT and the way we communicated with members, I mean, it was a headache. I mean, we were still using radios. I mean, we couldn't get statements out. We didn't have an internet. I mean, a website. I mean, it was an almighty mess. And I look at managers today and I think about how they're communicating and how I communicated at Ocean Reef. Probably we had a marketing department. Give me a break. We had 15 people in a marketing department, and their job was to communicate with our 6,000 or 7,000 members. I mean, times really changed. The other one was HR. I remember teaching a class at BMI 3 in Gulf operations. And I remember the first time I taught it, I asked the question, how many of you have an HR manager? Not 35 people, 36 people in the class at BMI, not a single person put their hand up. And I didn't have one at the time, but I knew that the whole concept of HR, of taking care of your people was on its way. And I think I did that for about 7 or 8 years at Michigan State. And by the time I'd asked that question towards the end, literally the whole room had an HR manager. So that was the other thing that I think really changed. And today you can't even imagine running a club in the US without having an HR, and some even have lawyers. The other thing is, and I mentioned this, it'll come up in another thing, and that is crisis management, right? It seems like, for me, my entire career, the last 23 or 24 years, has been dealing with major crises within the industry, whether it was a derecho windstorm that knocked out a 2012 Tiger Woods event, whether it was multiple microbursts or mini tornadoes that wiped out stuff at Congressional, to a full-fledged, hurricane at Ocean Reef where we are closed down for 112 days and cost us $40 million. I mean, that's the thing that nobody teaches you. This COVID that we're all dealing with right now, there's no class on crisis management. How do you deal? How do you communicate with members? That's stuff that people are learning about now, going through this themselves through COVID. And I think that's something that, was I never ever thought I'd have a crisis to deal with at Congressional other than figuring out how two members would communicate well with each other. So those were my observations.
Yeah, great. Thanks. David?
Yeah, well, I hate to ride on the coat backs of Greg, but when I arrived at New South Wales Golf Club, there were no systems. I think my predecessor used to write letters on Excel. Computer was limited. I had a security officer that come into the clubhouse with jeans and a t-shirt and the cigarettes rolled up in his sleeve and a mohawk with two dogs that bit everybody that arrived. I mean, it was a mess. The golf course was always great, but and they were hiring me to create some sophistication across every area. And I didn't know anything about anything. So it was a great evolution. But fortunately at that time, a stroke of luck was that one of my directors was a strategic planner. And that's how I got introduced. So we created this incremental improvement program every year. So in 5 years, we do this much, but in 20 years, you do this much. So, it was great to be a part of that because we were really a mess when I started. Again, a great golf course on the right track, but that was kind of my role. So I went through that. We have had a lot of builds at the golf club. We've replaced everything, the clubhouse refurbishment, works depot, halfway house, golf course, teaching facility, storage, parking, golf shop. We've redone it all. And I've really enjoyed that. But all that stuff takes a lot of work and a lot of planning. And that was this incremental planning component. So things have changed.
No.
David, while we lost David, I'd like to add one thing, and I think the panelists would get a kick out of this, and everybody listening. Greg, my first house committee meeting, sitting in the boardroom at Ocean Reef, one of the house committee members said to me, Mike, how long will it take to fix this mess? True story. Right out of his mouth, how long will it take? In my first House committee meeting. How long will it take? It was a doctor. I'll never forget that. And I had to come up with a very clever answer. Well, I don't really know what's wrong. I've got to still investigate and, give me 3 to 4 months. But it was, just straight up, how long is it going to take to fix this mess? And anyway, sorry, David's back. Keep going.
Yeah,
Thank you,
sorry.
David.
So I think, I think the reason we were hired is to fix messes in a lot of cases and bring sophistication, but you can't do it on your own. So if you're lucky enough to have good boards with some good planning and a vision of what exactly you're trying to work towards, then everybody can play on the same team and make it happen. The expectations today are much higher, and Michael talked about communication and so on. We're at the point where we're trying to work out what levels of sophistication we need in those areas. Whereas 24 years ago, we were just working out how, visitors are going to make their way to the first tee without being insulted. So we've come a long way. And I think that's been the joy of being in this journey, is that there's been this continuous improvement. We haven't been doing the same thing for 24 years. It's changed dramatically. Even though the game itself hasn't really changed, everything else has.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's some great insight for all these years. I've got one question came from the panel, from one of the viewers around food and beverage. I guess I might spin it around a little bit. His main thing is any tips on how to drive profitability in the food and beverage side of things. But yeah, I guess to the panel from 30 years ago, food culture has changed a lot, hasn't it? Just in general life. Expectations of when we go to restaurants and the experience and all that. And I guess what have you seen, or what are some of the thoughts around improving that side of your business? I know, Greg, you've got a thousand things on your plate at the Beach Club, but any thoughts around that? We'll go to Barry.
Look, nowadays there's so many dietary requirements. There's a big change with food. People eat very healthy, so we've tried to have an array of healthy options on our menu as well. We're still very much golfers' food, grill. You can get the schnitzels, burgers, those types of things. But obviously, you need to have healthy options now. We not at this time, but we do a lot of external business as well. We do a lot of business dinners, weddings, and obviously corporate golf and that sort of stuff, seminars and conferencing. We're not doing it at the moment, but obviously that drives our external side of our business and our food and beverage. But for members, I guess it's really we look at what they want, I think it's health conscious nowadays. People's eating habits have changed, and will probably continue to change.
Yeah, great, Greg.
To me, the big change has been casual dining. Obviously, when back in the old days, when I got in this business back in '74, the formal dining room was a very big deal at the club, and it was one of the magnet attractions, high-end food experience. And what I found is become much more casual over time. They still want high-quality food. They want creative food. They want food well done, but they want a very much more casual atmosphere. But one of the things that I've discovered as well is that people love certain things that are not healthy. And they love to see that healthy is available, but they buy, I won't say junk food, but they buy happiness food. And so we throw in enough things so that people can, if they want, get those quote healthy options, but they really want, when they come to the club, to also be comforted. So comfort food, I found, served in a casual way throughout the operation is still a winner. They want different and new and creative, but in doing so, they want it delivered as a casual food experience that emphasizes the fun side of food. That's what I found, and that's obviously a beach environment.
Yeah, I guess for driving profitability, it's it gets back to the adage of know what your members want and give it to them.
Well, can I say this though? If you're talking about profitability, to me, food service in a club for the members is a service that they pay for with their dues. If you can break even, we made money only in the regular business because we had an aggressive bar experience. I mean, if David were to come, believe me, 3 Mai Tais and he'd make me tons of money. But what we found that if you really want to make money, it's the function business where you make money. And the problem with that, there's a balancing act between more function business, weddings, corporate events, that sort of thing, and member satisfaction in a club. And that balancing act is a real challenge. And at my club, we made the decision 30-something years ago to increase the dues and get rid of any corporate events at all. So it had to be a wedding or a family-focused type of event. But other than that, you're not going to make any money. I mean, our experience was you're not going to make any money on food and beverage other than through the function side of the equation. Breaking even, making a little bit, yes. But we always had some board member that wanted us to make $500,000 in food and beverage. And I said, dude, I can do it for you. Your members aren't going to be happy. You're not going to be on the board long if you do that. Anyway, that was my experience, profitability.
Yeah, great. David?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, our view is members have already paid their subs. Get them what they want. Make it fun. Make it fair value. Make it enjoyable, friendly. The formalities are not what they're after. If we broke even, we're happy. And I'd have the same thing. Board members going in, well, if we have another 20 functions a year, I'm like, it's not going to impact anything except negativity amongst the membership. So you got to be clear about what you're trying to do with food and beverage. And what you're trying to do is make sure that it's commensurate with the expectation.
I'll pop up to you, Michael.
Yeah, I think everything that that everybody has said is very important. This is one of my favorite topics, Mike, as you know. And again, I would say when I got into the business, it was the traditional American country club fare, which really translated to steak and potatoes, right? So, you did that well, and you had the formal dining room and everything Greg said about casual dining. I'll relate a quick story. I think I was the first club ever to put a steakhouse into our club. And the reason for that was I was walking out of the club one night and a group of members a member was leaving with guests. And he was telling me about what a great day he had, great round of golf, lovely lunch, great drinks afterwards. And he was headed out. And I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to local steakhouse, the Capital Grill. I said, well, why would you go to the Capital Grill? Why wouldn't you have a steak here? And he was like, well, Mike, your steaks are great, but they're not really like a steakhouse. And it was like he'd slapped me in the face. It was an insult to me that he would go somewhere else. But I then realized he was absolutely true. We didn't have a Montague Grill. We weren't able to get BTUs to cook the steaks the way they were doing them in steakhouses. And when I suggested this to the board, and I wanted to spend $23,000 on a Montague Grill, they thought I was absolutely crazy. We took a restaurant that was doing maybe 20 covers a night, if we were lucky, and we turned that restaurant around to be basically full and was turning over nearly twice an evening. That was Monday through Sunday on the steakhouse. And that was listening to David's point. What do the members want? What are they asking you for? We did sushi, we did tapas. I think we had 7 specialty restaurants at Ocean Reef. The guy before me, who Greg knows really well, Paul Asprey, listened to what the members want and gave them a fish restaurant, a sushi restaurant, an Italian restaurant, a casual bar environment. And I think that's the thing is you can't just keep serving up the same stuff. You've got to be creative. You've got to do it. You've got to listen to what they want, give them what they want, because they're getting that from all the restaurants 2 miles down from your club. They're going and having the best sushi. They're having the best steak. Why would they eat at your place if they can go somewhere else and get a better experience? They're already committed to an initiation fee. They're already committed to dues. And in the US, to add the insult to injury, Greg, as you know, we had a food and beverage minimum. We forced them to come and eat at our club because our food's so bad. There's a food and beverage minimum. If you don't eat here, you're going to still get charged for not eating here. It's ludicrous. I mean, it's crazy.
Blackmail.
So
yeah.
Excellent. David, we'll get your final thoughts on that subject. With you.
Yeah, well, I've always been against minimums because, first of all, 70% of the people are going to spend that money anyway. The other 28% are going to spend it on takeaway at the last minute, where you make very little margin. And yes, you might get a 2% gravy, but to me, it's a silly concept.
Yeah, I've got one sort of main final question, and then we can get into some closing advice for the viewers. But when did you realize it was time to finish the role? When did you know that it was time to leave? And yeah, what were you going through when you were doing that, making that decision? We'll start with you, Greg.
Right. Well, to me, I've always broken life down into three pieces. The first stage is learning. The second is doing. The third is reflecting on what you've done and enlarging, enriching experience. When I arrived at 65, I said, hold it. I've had lots of experiences. Now it's time. If I've got 20 years or 10 years or what it might be, what I want to do is look closely at all that I've done, and I want to enlarge and enrich that through a deeper understanding of whatever it might be. And that was really it. And again, I remember when I wrote to the board of directors, and the name of the white paper was Time to Go. And they were always confused. They said, Greg, you still got the buzz. What are you talking about? And there were all sorts of things. One thing is, I really loved the club the way it was. I really didn't want it to change. And the minute you have that mindset, it is time to go, because that means you're going to be stuck in a rut. You can't, that's not good. Secondly, I really wanted to talk to members. I wanted to be able to sit down and talk to them, because I always stood up and talked, and you're doing the radar. And I really wanted long conversations with members to talk about all the interesting things that these people did, because they're all superstars at what they do. That's why they're members of these clubs. And I sat back and I said, I also love everybody who's here. Some of the people didn't deserve my love, that is on the staff side, but they were my friends. And I knew that that's not the right attitude for a manager to have. So I knew it was time to go when I said, hold it. I still have the buzz, but the buzz now is for reflecting on the experience. Like when I look at David, he's had a great run at his club. And what I would love to do is have caffeine and conversation with David, and we just reflect on certain issues that have existed, that have been expressed through those experiences. And that's when I knew it was time to go. And again, I didn't need the money or whatever. So that was certainly one thing. But the other thing was, I really wanted to spend, again, that third stage of my life, the reflecting and enlarging, enriching. And one, I do it through my writing, and two, I do it through my speaking. And to me, there's no greater joy than to get on an airplane in the old days, fly to Quito, Ecuador, and give a week's presentation to boards and staffs and that sort of thing. It gave me the buzz. But all that it was doing is forcing me to look deeply on this life journey of mine. Because believe me, when you get to be my age, it could end anytime. Yeah, there's cancer out there. There's all sorts of stuff. And I didn't want to waste the rest of my life doing. I wanted to spend that time reflecting. And that's exactly what it's been. So it's been the joy of my life has been this third stage of my life. So that's when I knew it was time to go.
Excellent, Greg. It was great spending a couple of weeks with you and Norman Spitzig the last several years, traveling through our region. That was a blast. Michael, your thoughts?
Similar to Greg, but I think mine is not as cerebral as his. So I would say I had got to a point in Congressional where I was looking for some more personal growth in what I was wanting to achieve. And I had been at a country club. I'd done, as you know, a number of events, culminated with the US Open. I'd gone through that. We started doing more events, 12, 13, 14. And I just got to a point, as I mentioned earlier, I really didn't want to leave. I was happy to retire and happy to kind of move off at age 62. And this offer that came to me to go to Ocean Reef came at age 60 and a half. And I couldn't understand why they'd want an old fart like me to go to Ocean Reef Club. But what Ocean Reef really presented to me was a totally different club than what I was used to. And it allowed me to really grow as an individual, to grow in experiences, and really to allow me to see things and do things that I would never, ever have done before. Managing an airport, a medical center, a marina, a hotel, a club, golf courses, all rolled up into one with, 1,500 homes. It just gave me a very exciting opportunity to do that. And I wasn't going to get that from Congressional if I stayed the extra 2 or 3 or 4 years. And this gave me that excitement, that real buzz to kind of enjoy my opportunity to grow within myself. Leaving Ocean Reef and retiring at 65, like Greg mentioned, was just a personal decision that I made that said, grandchildren, family, all the sacrifices you made, I needed time for myself to do all the things that Greg and I love to do, teaching, presenting, helping other clubs. And luckily enough, and I'm sure Greg's the same, I've been so busy in the last 2 years since this has happened. I can't even, my wife says I'm busier now than I was when I was managing clubs. And is that possible? But it's fantastic. It's a different look. You're looking through clubs through a totally different lens. So, David, you've got some exciting times ahead of you. And Barry, when you pull the trigger one day, you have some exciting times as well.
Yeah, David, how are you feeling? I guess has it really hit you yet?
As I said, I felt like, you just have this feeling in the pit of your stomach. And we've done great things at the golf club. There wasn't probably any big projects for the next few years because we've just done them. And I really like projects. Strategically, we're in a very good way. And I think, COVID gave me a great reflection on the bigger things in life. And, I've got 4 children and I got to spend more time with family. And it just gave me a reflection, this whole 50, 60 hours a week thing. Maybe it's come to the end of its tenure. Yeah, of course, it depends where you are in your life financially, and you got to be comfortable with all of that. But for me also, it was, I wanted to do something different, whether that's in golf or not. It was time to step away from being a golf club manager, reporting to a volunteer board, and have a crack at something else, get fresh, have a break, really feel excited again. And that was getting hard after 24 years. So I think we all got to listen to the pit of our stomach and make these big calls. As somebody once said to me, if you have difficult decisions, you have a good life. If you don't make the difficult, if you just make easy decisions, you have a difficult life. So you got to make them. And I just feel fantastic about it. And I love the golf industry. And I got to meet all the guys on the panel here through traveling and speaking. And I'd love to continue to do that in the future in some way, shape, or form. But I think you got to listen to your insides. And for me, it's a great opportunity. To wait another 5 years at New South Wales Golf Club probably wasn't really the right thing for me to do. So that's why I made the change.
Yeah, no, and your point about meeting, the people that we meet through our industry, there's just some great people out there, and with Greg and Michael, giving so much back to the industry over the years, we're very fortunate. A lot of the younger managers have an opportunity to reach out to any of you, probably just to ask some advice. I know with the GMA, there's those mentoring and sort of buddy groups, and just reaching out and getting feedback and some thoughts from others that have been around for a long time. So fantastic. Barry said, that question is probably not as relevant to you. I'm just thinking because you're still there. So I'm like, we have 2 more questions from the viewers, and then we'll do our closing sort of advice to everybody that's listening to this. So I've got one from hi Greg from Visa. You're one of your fellow.
Oh, Visa, how are you?
Chautauquans. How do you deal with longtime staff that may not view progress or change favorably, to keep them churning along and not becoming a barrier for change? It touches on the club culture of staff.
Well, to me, the key thing is you have to transfer the energy and the passion that you have to those people. And there are obviously ways of doing it, whether it be walk-around management, whether it be upbriefs and debriefs each day, whether it be all staff meetings once a month, whatever it might be. Those people have to see how important their job is, first of all. And secondly, how exciting it is to make a contribution to this wonderful culture that is part of the club that you are. And obviously, there are tactics that you can use to get through to those people. Now, the reality is that sometimes you can't, and you either have to isolate them in such a way that they don't degrade the quality of the service experience or the staff experience that you have, and sometimes you have to get rid of them. I know one of the problems when I first came to the Beach Club, and I mentioned this before, the staff were dreadful for any number of reasons, and I ended up having to fire or retire some very long-term staff because they were just rotten apples, in the bushel, if you will. And that was a difficult thing to do. And once you got rid of those, the other people that were there, obviously, they were my people, if you will, because there was a lot of turnover in staff. But my responsibility was to give them a buzz continuously. and to help them see how important their job was to the success of the club culture. So I put a lot of it on the shoulders of the manager, a fish rots from the head down sort of thing. So if you're going around and you have that buzz, people end up getting it as well. And obviously, there are different things that you can use, upbrief, debriefs, all the things that I was talking about. There are tactics to be used to both energize and reaffirm their commitment to the club. And it's a big deal.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, Barry, we'll finish this question off with Barry. And then the next question, I think, is probably we'll point toward Michael and David on it. Go ahead, Barry, your thoughts?
This is on leaving. I'm still here. Is that...
No, sorry. It's how do you deal with long-term staff? Yeah, maybe that's not a good question either.
Yeah. I think constant communication, meeting with them, keeping them up to date. For example, my key people here, food and beverage managers, chef, we have a regular weekly catch up. But I would catch up with them every day that I'm here and that they're here. Talk about the direction that we're going. Same with the course superintendent and our professional. As Greg said, sometimes you have to perhaps manage them out if they don't get on the same, if they're not on the same train as you're on, or not heading in the same direction. But I think it's just constantly communicating with them and meeting with them, and getting them in the direction that you're thinking. And if for some reason that doesn't work out in due course, maybe you need to look at moving them out of the place.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. The next question is our final one from the viewers, for Michael and David. Where do you guys see the PGA professional in the club? Growing the game, marketing, membership, coaching, etc. So where do you see the basic value, or the values that the PGA professional? I guess Michael, that's a perfect question for you with the work you're doing now and being a PGA professional.
Sure. I'm obviously a little biased being a golf professional myself, but let me say this. I think I would answer this question a little differently, because from the South African, Australian, New Zealand point of view, most of the club managers that I've certainly come across in these areas are really good golfers, or people who understand. And I don't mean good in that they're great players. A lot of them are very great players, but they seem to have an understanding of the culture of the game, the history of the game, the tradition of the game, the rules of the game. I wouldn't say that was necessarily as true in the United States. So I think the role of the PGA professional is one that really hasn't been exploited yet. I think we as an organization, as the PGA of America, need to continue to do a job to let the industry know what our professionals are capable of doing. And, I look at myself, there's probably, I want to say at last count, there were 33 of us that were both PGA and CCM certified. And that's really, there should be a lot more. And I think the professional as a role model, as somebody that people look up to, is something that in our industry, we just got to do a better job. I don't know, Greg referenced earlier about the PGA Championship. I don't know how many of you watched that. I was glued to the television. I thought it was a great championship. But again, if you think about that, that's our event. That's the PGA of America's event. Mike, you're a member. You're a PGA member. How much did you see us telling the story of what we do in the industry?
Yeah.
Right? Very little. We talked a little bit about coaching. We talked a little bit about teaching. But that's kind of dropping us back into that same traditional role. And I think what we have to do is, and again, I'm speaking as a PGA professional now, we have to figure out a way of how we tell a better story, because there are a number of people that are very, very highly skilled, financially skilled, food and beverage experience, and we got to do a better job. I think for the golf to grow and for it to be in the prominent position that it is, I think we have to have our golf professionals continue to be active and be involved in telling that story and helping grow that game.
My director of golf runs, he runs all of our comps. He runs basically a golf shop that turns over $1 million a year. He runs a training academy. He runs all of our storage facilities. I mean, it's a big business. And I think the more the better, because these guys come in with an appreciation of the game. They can communicate with the members on every level when it comes to golf. They know about their handicapping, the sensitivities of how they played that day. They're learning the retail business. They're running their own business as a subsection of the business. So the more they can progress and get up and actually run clubs, I think it's fantastic. But you can't put a golf pro who doesn't have the business acumen into a position he can't win at, and he's going to get beat up. So from Mike's perspective, I'm sure they're looking at what's the conduit to get these guys from great golfers and knowledge of the game into business pioneers, so that they can have both. And, like Rob Selly's an example of that over here, where he's got both, and he's run great golf clubs. So I'm all for it. It's just finding that balance and finding that talent, but the more the better.
Yeah, I'm seeing, especially in this region, we're having more PGA members become general managers, and the ones that have really put the focus in on the business side, the business acumen. They're learning food and beverage. They're learning, governance, and we've got more now than we did 5 years ago. Probably doubled or tripled because they've worked on it and got the skill set to take that.
You can't put them in the electric chair if they don't have the skills, because it'll annihilate them.
Yeah.
And David, I think that's the problem, is that oftentimes people assume, and it's not just in golf, I think it's in all the disciplines, you don't take somebody who's really good at something but has no experience in something else and then promote them to a position, right? And I think oftentimes they try and do that with a golf professional, and I think it's important, and that's something the PGA of America has really worked very hard at over the last couple of years, and that is to really give the education to round out a golf professional in all of the aspects of club management. It's not just private clubs. Remember, we represent public golf, we represent resorts, we represent high-end daily fees. So there's a number there and all of them require the same skills. They all require financial acumen. They all require food and beverage. They all require HR skills, good leadership, all of these things. So that's really been a big push, I think, for the PGAs around the world. I spent some time with your PGA and Australian PGA, New Zealand PGA, South African PGA, and ours is how do they give them the skill set? Because I agree with you, David. I think when it comes to golf, they certainly have the ear of the member, potentially even more so than the general manager has, because they come in from the golf course. They want to talk about their round. You're fussing around with HR or food and beverage, and that golf professional is there to listen to what they have to say. So that relationship is a very strong one, and it's how do you capitalize that relationship? And I think that's really where I've seen in the last 5 years the PGAs around the world, especially here in the US, doing a really good job of trying to educate our members to be able to take on additional responsibilities and additional roles. So it's encouraging.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks. We'll start wrapping up now, I guess, with our final question is, what pearls of wisdom that each of you can give to our viewers, our listeners. If there was one or two things that you would say, I think it's been mentioned a few different items today, a few different topics, but what would be that that parting advice, I guess, a closing advice? So we'll start with you, Michael. Again, we'll go with the youngster in the group from a career standpoint.
Yeah. Hey, it's actually a privilege to be called a youngster in this group. I just wish I looked a little younger. Michael, again, thank you to you and the panel and everybody else for taking time out and spending time with us. Again, it's all about learning, right? I mean, my goal in doing this was learning from the three other panelists and listening to some of the questions that came on. I think I'd go back to David's point earlier, and that was the gut. Your gut is going to tell you, I think when you boil this thing down to everything that we've all said, all the information that's been passed today, in your gut, when it's time to move and when it's time to stay. And I think your gut really has to lead you in everything that you do. And I think that would be my parting shot, would be listen to your gut. Do your research, do your homework, do all of the other analytics. But at the end of the day, yourself what you desire out of your career, why you staying on or why you leaving. So.
Yeah, great. David?
Yeah, look, I think the big thing, two points I'd say, and one of them I touched on, but the first thing I'd say is adaptability. If we get stuck, and it's easy when you get older to get stuck. If you get stuck too long, you're very vulnerable. And I think we all have to learn to be adaptable. And adaptability is uncomfortable, but I think if you do that, it's great. And the second thing I'd say is the old, difficult conversations, good life, easy conversations, difficult life. Don't avoid things. Have the difficult conversations. Get comfortable being uncomfortable because it's a great business. But if we avoid and get ourselves stuck because we're not taking on the issues, whether that's with your president or your key staff, get on top of things early. And it really is a great industry, but we have to be adaptable. It doesn't matter how much experience you have or how old you are. If you get stuck, you'll get sprung. And I think adaptability is really important.
Excellent.
Embrace change.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, Barry?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks to everyone for listening today. For me, I think it's a great industry. I think it requires a lot of commitment. You need to be flexible, versatile. I try and make work fun as well. I try and have a positive outlook all the time with staff, with committee people. At times, clubs can be unforgiving places. I've got a bit of a saying that clubs' definition of a club is that it's an organisation that can be hardest on those that do most for it. So don't take things too personally, and keep it fun, keep it positive, and you'll survive and thrive for a long, long time.
Excellent. Yeah, Greg, you wrap it all up.
I think the key to being a one club long timer, and that's what we're talking about here, staying at a club for a long time. The first and most important thing, you have to define success for yourself. How do you define success? And it might be your happiness equation. And does that club satisfy those things? What are your deeply embedded life interests? Does it give you time for your community and your family outside of the club? Does it financially satisfy the needs you have? Our happiness it can be broken down into different pieces. And we have to figure out what are those pieces, our definition of personal success. That's the first thing. And the second thing is you've got to understand club culture and find out whether or not you want to be in alignment with that culture or if you're capable of being in alignment with it. So the first thing is define happiness for yourself. Like I frankly, at the end of my journey, I said, I don't want any more money. I want more time off. And in America, having 6 weeks of vacation is a big deal. It's not in much of the world. But I wanted time more than I wanted money. So you've got to know what drives happiness for you personally. And then you've got to find a club that will actually allow those happiness components to exist. And whether it be your passions. I have a passion for bicycle riding. I commute by bicycle. So I'd arrive at the club on a bicycle every day. And the club endorsed that. It was part of their culture to allow that. So finding what makes you happy. How do you define success and happiness? Secondly, how does the club define its culture? And is there any alignment between those two? And the ultimate thing I'd say, and I ask a lot of managers this, and it's pretty tragic when I hear the answer. If you were a longtime club manager and they gave you an honorary membership at the end of the journey, would you use the membership and how frequently would you use it? And so many managers that I know say, I loved working there. I'd never want to be a member there because I'd never use it. And I'm just the opposite. I spend so much time at the beach club because there was alignment between my happiness and the club culture. So that's a question that we all should ask ourselves. If you were given a membership at this club, would you use it with frequency? And my answer was yes. So it's been a great journey.
Wow. Yeah, that's the great closing comments on that, and some very great insight. This is literally a conversation can go for hours and hours and hours, I'm sure. But I just want to thank all of you, the panelists, for your time. I know a couple of you are retired now. You probably have nothing else to do, but and to our viewers, to the viewers out there that are stuck in lockdown down in Victoria, there's a couple of you on. Our thoughts go out to you. It'll hang in there, and we'll get through this hopefully sooner than later. Thanks, David, for your time. Greg, Michael,
Sure.
Barry, this industry is so fantastic. I've been very fortunate to be in a place where I get to chat with you guys, guys like you, and run into you, wherever we are traveling or not traveling at the moment. But thanks, everybody. This is I'll close off the official proceedings with our recording and such. There might be a couple on here. I think it's a couple questions. If you want to stay on and ask the panelists if they're able to stay on for a minute or two, we can do some wrap up there just with the final questions. But thanks. That's all for GIC TV episode number 6 in the can. More to come. So please give us any feedback on any other topics. I'll send out a link to the recordings and the audio and anything else over the next couple of days. So if you want to share it or use it for any other training, I think there's some incredible wisdom in here that any of our younger managers and ongoing managers could take from. But thanks again. I'll shut the official recordings, and we'll see you soon.